Wonderful. Welcome, everybody. We're so excited that you're here. I want to start off with this gubernatorial spotlight by inviting and thanking our key candidate spotlight for tonight, Mr. Sean Spiller. Welcome, Sean.
Yeah, great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. We really appreciate our time. A lot of our members, we're a statewide group. A lot of our members are seniors and they really can't get to a lot of in-person activities and events. So to have you spend your time, and I know you're home with family, so to have you spend your time with us, we greatly appreciate it. And I am so thrilled. This lineup just blows my mind. I'm so thrilled to have the state's top advocates in their respective policy areas join us tonight to ask Sean the tough questions. And hopefully we get some back and forth. So with that, I want to just make introductions really quick. First, we have Doug O'Malley with environmental leader in our state. Welcome, Doug. I affectionately call Doug my work husband because we talk maybe 4 times a week. So I really enjoy working with Doug. Secondly, we have Julie Lorea Borst, who is well known in the education with Save Our Schools NJ. Welcome, Julie. Nice to see you again. Julie and I work on policy as well. And last but not least, one of my dearest and favorite people, Antoinette Miles with New Jersey Working Families Party. Welcome, Antoinette. So we're so glad to have you. So how it's going to go, and just so the people tuning in and maybe are for the first time, just so you know, all of our candidates had received a bank of questions that a lot of our advocates, the coalition members of the various coalitions, had added the question to. We're the advocates, and we work with the administration, both the upper house, Senate, and lower house state assembly to do a lot of the advocating for whether it's clean air or access to voting or whatever. I really relied on all of our partners to come up with these questions. So all of our candidates were given a bank of questions that we're going to ask. No candidate gets an advantage from going later. They all have the same questions. And we want to focus it on policy because this is what we do day in, day out. I was not kidding when I said that Doug is my work husband and Antoinette might be my work wife. So it's all fair game, right? All right. So I'm going to start off first with the governing questions. With that, I'm going to ask Julie and Doug to go off camera. And also Antoinette, you'll go after me. So I want to spotlight just on Sean for the moment. So Sean, we're just going to jump right in if that's okay with you.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Awesome. And so I would advocate that you speak, just like I said it for our previous guests, just speak truthfully, frankly to us. And we are just so excited to have you here and to hear from you. So I'm just going to start off where I left last, which is as an advocate, all of us, Julie, Doug, Antoinette, and some of our viewers know that we work with the governor, the legislative leadership, and working with them is critical in achieving results. What is the relationship that you have with legislators and with leadership?
Well, Wynn, thank you for the question, and I'll just say this. I think as maybe some of your listeners don't know, maybe that I'm right in there with you guys. As an advocate in many ways, advocating for what we want to see in this state. So, quite frankly, I think that's one of the areas that distinguishes me from some of the other candidates running right now. Yes, I've served as a mayor and a council person for 12 years in my home community of Montclair. But I also have the perspective of working to try and get things through the legislative process to get things into law. And that does mean exactly what you just said. It means we've got to have a relationship with the speaker and an assembly. It means we've got to have a relationship with the Senate president and the full Senate, because those are the folks we have to talk about how we're going to craft a bill and what we'd like to see in something, and testify in front of different committees and groups and kind of walk through that process to get something done. I think, uniquely familiar with what that looks like and how to get things done. There's been very significant legislation I've been really, really proud of in another one of my roles as the president of the New Jersey Education Association to shepherd through. And that process, I think, is going to be invaluable right now. We are at a moment where we need to have strong partnerships in this state especially with everything that we're seeing at the national level. It's important
Mhm.
for us to be kind of, firing on all cylinders, as they say. So I think that's going to be an important piece of it right now. And bottom line is, I've got great relationships. Understand certainly that it starts with an understanding of putting forward good policy, and good policy is good politics, and certainly working with folks to say, how do we have the conversations? How do we make sure we're inclusive in that process to get folks on board, to get the support we need, and to get something signed into law?
I'm so glad that you brought in your past experience as, negotiating the different bills and moving that through and shepherding it into law. So, as governor, what would be your vision and agenda for New Jersey?
Yeah, listen, anyone who's heard me speak before knows that I'm focused on a number of things. It's about making sure New Jersey is more affordable, right? I say that as somebody who, came to this country as a young boy with my parents, but it was, in search of that American dream, right? It was come here, come to New Jersey, because my mom was a math teacher in Jamaica. So she said, we're going someplace with great schools. So Julie, I'm looking at you, even though you're off camera as well, but listen, she said, hey, we're going someplace with great schools. We're gonna make sure we're putting down our roots here, and this is the place we want to live and raise a family. But I knew even back then it was a sacrifice. My dad would be away for months at a time, sending dollars home, and my brother and I kind of recognized, like, my parents, we're working hard so that we could enjoy this life that we were living, and everything I've seen, whether it be as a teacher and talking to the parents of the kids that I see all the time, or certainly even as the president of the New Jersey Education Association in our communities, fighting alongside so many of you on so many issues. I've just seen that it's just really hard to make it in New Jersey. It's just a hard place to afford. And so for me, it's a focus on making sure we're addressing the issues around housing, right? How do we make sure we've got housing that folks can afford? And I know, I'm sure we're going to talk about these in a little bit more detail later, but how do we do that? How do we focus on keeping our healthcare costs down, right? Everybody should have quality, affordable care, and they should be able to get it, and it shouldn't be something that is a choice between food or the healthcare you need. How do we provide quality early education and childcare? Not only does it mean just a lifetime of earnings and success for so many of our students, but we also know that for so many young families, it's just such a heavy cost burden, right? That average of $19,000 a year, plus early care and aftercare, which at the Y in Montclair is another 10,000, right? It's just so expensive. So
Yeah.
we've got to do something about that. And should a child or parent be setting their kids up for college, we got to make sure they can do that as well, right? So it's addressing, when we talk about the environment and we talk about investing in a green economy, and we talk about energy. And I know that's some of the questions we're going to focus on as well. They're all
Yeah.
connected, and we've got to make sure we're focusing in that space as well to make sure things are affordable, and understand, oh, by the way, we do that by moving towards green energy and making sure we stop our reliance on big oil and everything else. So I think all of these things connect, but it is all framed up with the backdrop of who we have right now in the White House, right? I see
Yeah.
that, kind of as I started, look, as an immigrant myself, it's very personal for me. So when I talk
Mhm.
about, aggressively, having an attorney general who's going to be very aggressive, defending our rights here in New Jersey, standing up for every single resident, as governor, using the bully pulpit and certainly executive order and every tool at my disposal. And then to your first point, working with the legislature to codify a lot of the things that we need into law right now, that they should be doing now, and certainly I would, as governor, push for. These are all important pieces because folks know that they're coming after us, right? Not just some of us; they're coming after all of us.
Yeah.
And it's up to us to stick together and make sure that we've got a state that is pushing back in a strong way.
All right, so we're at 7-Eleven, and I want to make sure that I give our state advocates the time to ask you questions. I just want to clarify that with Action Together for tonight, for this hour, we're only focused on policy areas that we work on a day-to-day basis. So it's going to be governing democracy, clean energy, and education. So I want to make sure we have time for that. What that means for you guys, the attendees, is if there are questions that you have that we're not going to cover specifically, like if you're looking for immigration, that is not in our toolbox. So we're going to leave that to groups, advocates who work on immigration on a day-to-day basis to ask at their forums. So if you have questions, please drop it in the Q&A, and a staff member from Sean Spiller's campaign will endeavor to answer those questions for you. And when the questions are answered, everyone will see it. So my time is up, and I appreciate all those answers. So let me introduce Antoinette, who's going to come on and ask you democracy questions, which actually will lead right into from governing. So, Antoinette, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Wynn. Sean, so great to see you, as
See
always.
you as well. Good to see you as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, it's like seeing old friends. I appreciate so much what you just said, in your comments there about the Trump administration and what we have to do in New Jersey to really be a firewall to that. I think that so many right now are worried about the state of our democracy, worried about the state of our institutions, and how all of those things will continue to be held up, especially as we face constitutional crisis one after another. And I think that for working families, we have been attuned very much at the state level to democracy issues, transparency, and making sure that we have fairness in government. And we know that in recent years that New Jersey has passed laws weakening transparency and open government, including a law in last year that was passed to limit public access to government records. And, that was passed in 2024 by state lawmakers, approved by the governor, to make changes to the Open Public Records Act, making it more difficult for residents to obtain information about government actions, to know what their government is doing, despite those records belonging to the public. So my question to you is, if elected, do you commit to restoring and strengthening the provisions of the Open Public Records Act to ensure greater accountability and transparency? And please specify any reforms or actions that you would prioritize in this area, in this effort to make sure that public access to government records is upheld.
Yeah, I think Oprah is a huge piece and unbelievably important. I say that both as as a resident who knows how important that is, but also I'd say for so many organizations and groups who want to find out information. It's been an extremely useful and certainly important tool. So I think there is overreach in terms of what was passed. I think look under the concerns or comments around whether it be data miners or others pulling information, which I get, right? Look, I get it, right? No one wants to be spammed with all the information because you go down and you fill out, your form for a wedding certificate or something, right? Nobody wants to get inundated with some of these pieces which certainly was happening. But there's got to be a way that we can look at those pieces and say, how do we, push back on that? How do we limit that from these folks who are just trying to make money off of us? Versus the concerns of folks who are just trying to get information, right? Information so that they can participate in government, right? Participate in this democracy, which is what we want. So look, I think we could have addressed those pieces in a much more surgical way, and certainly not with this broad brush. I think that was probably utilized as an opportunity to kind of go wider than was needed. And as governor, yeah, I commit to making sure that we narrow that down, go after the pieces that we, I think all generally agree we don't want to see happening in terms of some of those privacy pieces as well. But we understand that we want to make sure folks have access to information and making sure that that's readily available so people can make informed decisions and can participate in the process.
Yeah, thank you. And I know, especially for organized labor, Oprah has always been a powerful tool in the bargaining process.
Yeah, I mean that's where you get so much of that information, right? Which is
Yeah.
which is obviously key, and it's important for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So just continuing on that thread of some of the rollbacks that we have seen in Trenton, prior to 2024 and 2023, we did see the Elections Transparency Act overhaul New Jersey's campaign finance laws. And it did open up a lot of the floodgates for outside spending in elections without public disclosure. And it also doubled contribution limits to political parties and candidates, and eliminated a lot of the strong local pay-to-play provisions that existed. And actually, New Jersey Advanced Media took a look at this and saw that, after the passage of the law, 150 or more contracts and their executives contributed to political parties. And a lot of those funds came from large engineering firms, law firms, and contributions were double than what they had normally have been. And so really, there is this sense of of the tilting of the playing field when it comes to our campaign finance. So I would love to know how you would strengthen our campaign finance laws, especially strengthening our pay-to-play rules, and if there's any other specific reforms or actions that you would prioritize in this effort.
Yeah, listen, I think that fundamentally you answered it in your question kind of in terms of the challenges and the dynamic and what it creates, right? I think it's problematic. Let me just say clearly, like we should have public disclosure of where these dollars are coming from and who's contributing. That should be pretty much a given. We should, when we talk about limits, anytime we're doubling limits, adding other funds, right, that folks can, kind of put off to the side to pay for other pieces, which is just allowing for more contributions, which is a higher limit, basically. It's problematic. It's problematic because I can tell you certainly in the role that I've been in now with my career in terms of representing, school bus drivers and, aid workers and certainly, teachers in the classroom, we're never going to have that kind of money. We're never going to have the money to be able to say, here's so-and-so who's going to write a $10,000 check or something higher. It's important. And I say to folks, no matter their political affiliation, that this is something we should all agree on, right? The more that we have a say, the more that our voices matter, the more that the dollars are significant dollars for us, right? Whether it's $100 or $200, the more that all of that matters, the more that our elected officials have to listen to us, right? And again, it doesn't matter, kind of what you're arguing for or from what lens. That's a good thing, right? And so for me, and specifically as governor, I would look to make sure that every single one of these contributions, people know where those dollars are coming from. And certainly I think that's important. And I also think, when we see these doubling of the limits and, putting all these other, also these other accounts, these, stewardship accounts, basically dollars that they're allowed to use for rents and other pieces. Like, look, that doesn't make sense to me. It just is, we can take more of your money. And it's problematic because we all know who the only ones that can contribute to that are. And maybe I'll just use it to make this point too. We are all, especially on the Zoom, I'm sure, but as a party, as a Democratic Party, we are all up in arms, right? When we see what's happening in DC, right? When we see, absolute power, absolute money, not even hiding it anymore, just saying they're going to take everything away from us. Well, look, that's the extreme of it for sure. And that's the continuation of it for sure. But it is all part of the same family of just allowing those folks who are the most well-connected or the rich amongst us to make all the decisions. And we're not immune from it here in New Jersey. And I think, exactly for all the reasons you kind of asked in the way you framed the question, we're seeing a movement towards that, including here in New Jersey. So, I'd push back because I think it's important that we're kind of living those values that we're pushing back against at the national level also.
Absolutely. Wynn, I just want to make sure that I'm keeping on time. Do I have time for one more?
Wynn had the minutes down before. She was like, 7-11, 7, I'm like, oh, I don't know.
You have good time. You have 7 minutes and 7 and 30 minutes. There's 7 minutes, 30 seconds, sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, you're again teeing up, right, my next question, Sean, right? You talked about, sort of wealthy special interests and, being able to dictate and decide a lot of things within our politics. And we know that in New Jersey, up until very recently, we had the county line system in our primary elections that empowered party bosses to essentially choose election winners at the expense of voters' choice and an even playing field for all candidates. Through our federal court decisions in the Kim v. Hanlon litigation, of course, the Conforti v. Hanlon litigation that Working Families is a part of, we know that our county line ballots are likely to be unconstitutional, and we're on the cusp of finally being able to have truly fair ballots in New Jersey. But we know that the legislature has recently tried to chip away at that progress, and Governor Murphy has signed a new bill that, in our view, did fall short of the fair ballot that voters did deserve. And so my question to you is, do you support, implementing office block ballots, but specifically making sure that there is an equal and fair draw for each candidate seeking office without the bracketing or grouping of running mates simply because they're running together?
Yes. Short answer is yes. first let me applaud and thank, Senator Andy Kim for some of his efforts, along with so many of you, right? So I know the work that you've done organizationally for years, even before that. So kind of teed that up for the senator. But look, I just want to say, obviously, as we move towards all the things I'm talking about, like little d democratic, values, making sure we're trying to engage more people in the process. I think they're all connected, right? I often, as I'm out there right now, hear folks who say to me, Sean, almost 600,000 more Democrats stayed home in the last election. What's that all about? And I've got a theory. Someone else has got a theory. I have to think that part of it is the fact that folks just don't like the fact that we feel excluded from the process and that it's already decided for us, right? And that may be gerrymandered districts at times, or it certainly also is the process like we're talking about right now, where, and I've seen it personally, right? Hey, Sean, come in and speak to this county committee. Oh, by the way, we've already voted and, we've already decided, but come talk to us anyway, and you're like, wait a minute, what kind of process is that, right? That doesn't make sense. And certainly, we see it with the party lines, especially before, where the county lines, where you literally would just have one group and there it was, right? And we know that's an advantage and it's unfair. And I think there is still more to do, right? And I say that even as somebody who's from Essex County, where somehow defying all the math that exists out there, and I say it as a science teacher, but I could do a little bit of math, somehow things still happen to line up, and beat those odds, right? But so there's still more work to be done, but I fundamentally say this. Look, I fully agree with your question, and certainly would support that as governor, to say we've got to move to a process that is block ballot, no bracketing. Everyone's got a fair shot at this. It needs to build on the work that we've done so far, not kind of roll it back. But we shouldn't surprise us either, right? Power wants to hold on to power, and certainly we're going to face that pushback. But I think with certainly some loud voices, and certainly I'd hope to bring mine to bear along with the Senator Andy Kim, that is, in terms of saying, hey, listen, as governor, this is what I believe and why. And by the way, if I'm sitting there as governor, it's because I've worked around that and beaten that system right now. And, kind of obviously would be emphasizing that, there's more work to be done.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And also just all of the your acknowledgement of everyone who's been involved in this movement, including so many who are on this call today. It certainly took a lot of legal advocacy and blood, sweat, and tears to get to that moment. So
Yeah, I remember that the lawsuits going and trying and looking for angles and who's got standing, all the different things, and then kind of culminating in almost like it was such a rapid way, right? It was years of work and then very rapidly. So, touche, and kudos to everybody involved, and certainly to you for the involvement of the organization on that. It's a huge win.
yeah. And if I still have some
You
time,
have
when it's giving me
3
that look like I
minutes. You
don't.
both have 3
Okay,
minutes. Let's
very
go.
quickly, very quickly. All right. So we have many organizations, including Action Together New Jersey, the Institute for Social Justice, League of Women Voters, who have been working to expand voting rights in New Jersey, expand voter access, and to your earlier point, right, of people staying home, increasing voter turnout. So I would love to know what your position is on same-day voter registration to enfranchise voters, and how would you work with the legislature to get it into law? And that's my question.
Yeah, well, listen, keeping it within the 2.5 minutes left or 2 minutes left, yeah, I fully support, right? If there's a blanket answer, it's anything to break down barriers, get more people involved, allow more people to engage in the process. I'm for it, right? And same day voter registration is a piece of that for sure. It's something that I think, we don't want to be turning anyone away on election day, and certainly, if somebody has taken that time, decided they're going to go in there and check that box for someone or a group of folks, we want to make sure they can get in there and do that. So I fully support it. How we move to make sure we get that done, I think, look, there's a lot of switching roles here, right? I say it as an advocate and an activist in so many ways, where we're pushing up to make that happen, and we're pushing on our legislators to consider an issue and move it forward. I would say that this is an opportunity where this is our chance. This is our chance to have somebody who is fighting for this and has been fighting for these things, and this specifically alongside of all of you and so many of our residents, sitting in the governor's office, which I hope to be, and pushing down also to say, hey, no, this is something that's important. This is something that we should do. And when we combine that, the efforts from the governor's level, and certainly all the work from so many of our grassroots activists pushing, I think we get to a spot where we have the pressure that's needed to effectively get something done.
Thank you so much, Sean. I'm going to turn it back over to Lynn, who's going to turn it over to Doug, I think, for the next section.
All right.
That was so great. Thank you so much, Antoinette, for heading a very critical policy area for us. So I really enjoyed just sitting here and listening to her experience, and also Sean, all the times that you guys have worked on it. The next policy area is 15 minutes with my work husband. Hey, honey, how you doing?
Doing great. It's only what, like the fifth time we've talked today?
I know. So Doug is deep in the trenches on all things environment. And given what we heard today, this morning, with the Trump administration yanking the permit that was already permitted under the Biden administration, I think this section, the next 15 minutes, is so timely. I know many of you, I'm seeing it, in my inbox right now, how devastated people are. So with that, Doug, you have 15 minutes.
Great. Thank you so much, Wynn. Thank you, Sean, and thank you to my co-panelists, Antoinette and Julie. There's a lot to cover here, so we're going to use every second of these 15 minutes. But let's start. Wynn was ripping something from the headlines. I want to go back to last week and just give a huge appreciation to the amazing organizing work of the Ironbound Community Corporation and the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance for their work opposing the emergency backup PVSC power plant in Newark's Ironbound. Those organizations and so many more organizations across the state have rallied and fought against having a fourth gas plant in the heart of the Ironbound. Unfortunately, Governor Murphy's DEP just last month approved an air permit. Just last week, the EPA signed off on the air permit that would allow this project to go forward. PVSC has not voted on this project, and I would love to hear from you, Sean, what your position is on the plant, what you're doing to fight it, and how, if it is built, how would you make sure that it would not run it would run only truly in emergencies?
Yeah, well, appreciate that. I might start there at the end, last, and work backwards. But as governor, look, that's what has been sold, at least right now, in terms of those who are saying, here's why it's necessary, that it is only for emergency use, and that's the only time it would be fired up. And certainly we have to hold people to that statement, right? And hold people to account when they say that's what it's for. Obviously, we know the dynamics of the environmental impact, should we be faced with power loss there. But I think it's a broader example, though, and this is me leading backwards here. I think it's a broader example of us just not planning ahead and not being aggressive enough in our move towards clean energy and green technologies, and certainly just a broader green economy as a whole, right? We are oftentimes in these siloed conversations, and you pit folks or pit issues against one another of like, well, look here, let me give you a couple bad choices here, and you tell me which one you're willing to live with, right? And of course, folks then are like, well, I don't want one, I don't want the other. How am I going to navigate this, right? And I think that's somehow and sometimes where we see these issues still move forward and prevail, versus saying, hey, listen, let's get ahead of this. Let's plan these things more broadly in advance, and let's move forward with some of the technologies that we need to keep exploring. And I know we can talk about this in relation to some of the other questions you're going to ask, but where are we? Like, of course, we need to focus on solar, but let's focus on battery technology when we want to make sure we're prepared for something like this or otherwise. Okay, if they're going after wind and attacking and pulling permits and doing everything else, how do we pivot? How do we look at being nimble, right? In the sense of us being prepared in state. How do we make sure that we are doing everything we can on the state side here to prepare and to set up for, yes, a future president for sure, but also to move through our permitting processes that oftentimes take too long and get us into a place where we can't get things done in a rapid fashion. Like, all of these things, I think, are areas where we can focus, and it doesn't put us in that choice of kind of one bad option or another bad option, and we're making that pick. So I would, as governor, say this is what was sold, as why it was intended. That's the only time it should ever be used. And secondarily, from my perspective, it's with more advanced planning and investment at the state level, especially with the reduction in investment at the federal level, that we're not having the same conversation, some similar conversation about something of a bad choice and worse, a year or 2, 3 from now.
Yes, and thank you so much for that, Shauna. And obviously, in that dichotomy between clean and dirty energy, we certainly know that the oil majors are clearly responsible for climate change. As you probably know, the Climate Superfund bill, it's also known as the Make Polluters Pay Act, is starting to move in Trenton right now. And that would have New Jersey's largest climate polluters pay for the damage they've contributed to climate change, rather than placing the burden on taxpayers. I wanted to hear from you just your position on the legislation, and how, if yes, how will you ensure that it's enforced to ensure that our most vulnerable communities receive the necessary funds to protect against the worst impacts from climate change that we'll see?
Yeah, well, I fully support it, right? So fully support it. Here are folks who have just taken money from us and out of a system for decades, right? Just more and more and more, and now to be able to say, well, it's up to all of us to help clean that up and do that work. That's unacceptable, right? That's got to come out of all those margins and those profits that folks have gobbled up for so long, and quite frankly, didn't share with any of us, right? So when you go in and you do that kind of polluting, then it's on you to clean that up. And we know the impacts that we're all paying for. I say it all the time. Look, I can't even begin to share the devastation that folks are feeling when as mayor, right, I'd be talking to folks and consoling folks who are saying, oh my God, Sean, we've got flooding again, and here we are, and I thought this was supposed to be 100-year storm, and yet we had it 2 years ago, just as bad. What's going on? There's an impact, right? There's a cost. There's a cost emotionally. There's a cost financially. There's a cost even if you're able to, get back on your feet, to be able to get the insurance you need. I mean, all of these things we're paying, right? We're paying for that, not big oil, right? And that's unacceptable, right? So at the end of the day, they've pulled the profits, sucked the profits out of the system, but we're all the ones left to clean up the damage, right? Pardon the pun there. So, with that, I fully agree with it. I think we've got to be aggressive in that. Now you ask, how are we aggressive in that? It's as I mentioned before, whether it's immigration or other issues. Also, it's having an attorney general who's going to aggressively enforce our laws and go after polluters and make sure they are paying their fair share to clean up and certainly offset these costs that we're all paying for. It's also working with the Environmental Protection Agency to make sure that we are, of course, being aggressive there as well through agencies and agency regulations and other pieces to go after folks. And I think you combine those pieces, the legal action, the regulatory, and certainly policy pieces. You combine that, and I think you get to a space where you can be pretty aggressive with it. So it's important, that you'll follow through if we are in that spot where we can take advantage of it and not leave it hanging. But it's an understanding that this isn't like this isn't us, piling on here. This is them taking the money out, and this is us just trying to get a little bit back, so we're not the ones bearing all the burden of these additional costs that we're all paying right now.
Just like the original Superfund, right? So talking about energy, right? It's going to be spring next week. It's going to be summer shortly after that. And we are now at a moment where the bills that our ratepayers are going to face starting this summer are going to skyrocket. And that's because of BPU approved rate hikes of roughly over $25 a month per resident. That's average. This is a historic increase, and it's not because of the BPU. It's because of an organization that really nobody's ever heard of. It's PJM. It's our regional electric grid, and PJM increasingly is to become a four-letter word. It's received one of the worst ratings of any electric grid in America right now because of its failure to get more clean energy onto the grid, because of interconnection delays, and also because fossil fuel plants are increasingly becoming unreliable because of extreme weather. I'd love to hear from you. How would you work to change the way our regional electric grid does business, so that we're not faced with these sky high prices?
Yeah, well, listen, I can tell you, having a little firsthand experience there, I remember, as you may likely aware, in Montclair, where we moved towards an residential energy aggregation plan. And one of the goals that we were doing was we're going to PJM and saying, hey, we want greener energy, right? Not only we're trying to, get a good rate, but we want something that is, exceeding the state mandates, and we want to make sure, we're pretty progressive in terms of fighting for the environment. We want something green. And oh my God, the struggle to make that happen, it's unreal, because you just, to your point, right? There haven't been the investments in the green technologies and green energy that there should have been. So that was a micro version of just kind of firsthand experience with it. And now here we are, a number of years later from that point, but we're having a broader conversation. And I think I do think this, and I'll use it, cautiously. But I will use this word. I think there's a potential opportunity here. And I say it in this sense. There is probably no better way, clearer way to have folks pay attention than to see massive increases in bills, right? When folks see that, I pay attention, you pay attention, we all pay attention when we see our our bill's going up by that much money, right? That's a significant increase and everybody's going to feel it. And for folks who, maybe aren't as engaged in the issue or aren't as focused on it, all of a sudden they're paying attention. And I think it's then the opportunity, I say it as an educator, to educate folks as to say, hey, listen, we're seeing this because that talk about, green renewable energy, it isn't like, hey, that's nice. If you happen to care about the earth and the environment, that's nice. If you hope that you're leaving a good place for your 7-year-old and 4-year-old like me, that's nice. No, this is about your pocketbook right now, folks, right? And if we want to make sure we're continuing to meet our increasing energy demands in this state, right, constantly going up, and we know as we talk about, other technologies, emerging technologies like AI and other pieces, it is only going to continue to grow. If we don't want to see these increased costs going up and up and up because of the fact that there's not an investment in green energy, renewable energy, then we got to wake up, right? So I think this is that moment to say to folks, let's connect the two for you, right? And as governor, that's exactly what I do. Let's connect the two. This isn't even just about, Trump goes right, we go left, or things like that. This is about, hey, we need to invest right now in New Jersey. We need to invest to be leaders in the green economy, but certainly green renewable energy. We need to do it because it is the right thing, but we need to do it because we don't want everybody to keep paying all these massive costs, right? So we need to do it collectively for that reason as well. And I think it again is that chance for us all to kind of be on the same page, making that point, sharing that clearly. And I think you'll see much more buy-in from folks when we're talking about whether it be wind, right, or solar or other places. I think people will look at it and say, well, let me take another look at that, right? I know I was maybe, all things being equal and no change in my life, I probably maybe say, I don't know if I really need that or want that. Now, suddenly, let's take another look, right? Let's take another look. Let's talk about what that means. Let's talk about ways to effectively get to yes for some of these projects and some of these ideas. But I think that's a moment here where we can kind of move forward in a way that we haven't seen in some time.
Yeah, and it's not like fossil fuels are cheap either. Speaking of four-letter words, though, let's talk about New Jersey Transit really quickly, because there is a clear record. Even if you don't take New Jersey Transit, it is not living up to its potential. The frustration from bus riders, the frustration from train riders, it feels like it's at a historic level, and we're about to see another fare increase, an automatic one. What's your plan? What are the specific steps that you'll take to make sure that we have better service, that we have less delays, we have better route access, and that we are actually providing the funding, dedicated funding that New Jersey Transit needs? And specifically, if you could talk more about ending the raids to New Jersey's capital budget, as well as ensuring that the dedicated funding from the corporate transit fee actually goes to transit throughout throughout its time and in the next few years.
Yeah, well, I think it's imperative that we stop the raids, right, and that we invest the dollars from the corporate transit fee into NJ Transit. And I'll just say, let me start with this. When I talk to even a lot of the businesses in the state who are paying those dollars, they often start with saying, hey, listen, if we know that's really where the dollars are going to go, we're not necessarily happy about it. But these are the folks who are using New Jersey Transit to get to work, right, and get to work on time and making sure they're productive. These are folks who are taking it to get back home and do all the things. So I think they get it. I think where I've heard the frustration, even from them, is that, hey, the dollars, then we don't believe they're really going to go there, right? And that's a problem. So it starts with making sure we're actually dedicating the dollars to make some of the improvements you're talking about. And I really appreciate you asking the question kind of back to our previous conversation, because I want to be careful and say, like, hey, we're not talking about diverting, funds from the environment into one place to another. But they are connected conversations, right? As we are investing in, improvements to New Jersey Transit, more specifically our buses, we can move towards, electrification, right, and investment in our electric grid and all the other things that we know are so important. And what is that? That's a conversation around transportation. It's a conversation around NJ Transit. It's a conversation around the environment. It's a conversation about a lot of different things. But especially as we're in tighter and tighter budgets, and we see, obviously the focus of potentially what the Trump administration may do to pull even more dollars away from us. Figuring out ways that we creatively, get more and more out of the dollars we're putting in to accomplish a number of different goals is important, right? Now, look, this is one of those issues where everyone you talk to, they are talking about this issue. I say it with a smile, and then I'm literally dropping my 7-year-old off at school. I'm running to the door because I know I got in there a little bit late. So I'm trying to catch the door, so I don't have to sign them in late and whatever else.
You've been there.
And the secretary at the door, she grabs me, and I'm thinking she's gonna say something. She welcomes Tyson. She's like, "Come on in, get to class." And then she wants to be in my ear about her experience on the bus, right? And what that looks like. And it didn't work. It was unsafe for her. And she shared her whole story with that. And, unfortunately got a little bit injured there. But she's here talking about it more broadly, right? This is what it means. Every day, this is what it means to me. So we got to understand that what do folks want, right? They want something that's safe. They want something that's clean. They want something that's reliable, and they want something that's affordable, right? And when we talk about how we invest, we've got to say this: hey, look, on the level of trains and other pieces there, we know there's a regional approach and a conversation that has to happen. We know there's a conversation with Amtrak and federal pieces as well. So that's a hard one in terms of making sure we get the dollars and the investment that we want to see. But especially as we move to buses, we have much more say there. And we know it's not just a conversation around improvements to the fleet, but it's also looking, I think, at a broader transportation plan and seeing where our routes need to be and what that looks like. Right. Anyone from South Jersey will tell you, right, there's not enough mass transit, right? So we do have to focus there, whether that be, investing in light rail and then also looking at routes and seeing what we can do. But even, up by us, right, when we saw, and when DeCamp goes under or we lose certain bus lines, we've got folks who are also scrambling to say, how can New Jersey Transit fill in that void? So I think they're connected. I think we, invest in green technologies. I think we invest in a transportation master plan that puts our dollars where they should go. I think we stop stealing and raiding from accounts because we've got to show that investment. And for me specifically, I say this. I think folks can understand when you lay out a plan, right? So for me, it would be, what are the goals we have for New Jersey Transit? What are the timelines we want to hit, right? And so let's show folks, like, here's our goals and here's the time frame to do it. And you can see it yourself. Like, are we achieving these goals? Where are we falling short? Where are we exceeding them? So folks know it. And in the interim, until we get to where we all want to be, what are the contingency plans that are in place? So folks aren't scrambling, don't know, what's in effect or what they're going to do. We've got a clear indication of this is what's going to happen if A, then B. We're going to communicate it in this way. We're going to make sure you know about it until we continue to make the improvements that you need to see, we want to see in the system. We're going to make sure you are well aware of your alternative options, right, along that journey. So I think that's how we kind of invest in all of it and certainly create a system that works better for more folks.
That's great. Thank you, Sean, for doing a deep dive there. We have only a minute left here, but just real quick, and this is not a
Doug, I'll give you credit, and I know I'm still but I see win on again, so it probably means you don't have a minute. But as a strong advocate, you know exactly to say, I think we only have a minute, so you're stealing it anyway. Good job, Doug. I like it. Go ahead.
But it's a big one.
Yes, sir.
Talk quickly on your position on the New Jersey Turnpike expansion in Hudson County, which is estimated to cost more than $11 billion for 8 miles going into the Holland Tunnel, but not expanding the Holland Tunnel itself. And then can you just briefly talk about whether more money should be coming to New Jersey Transit from the Turnpike Authority and the steps you take to make our transportation more sustainable and equitable across the state?
Yeah, so let me handle quick. Like you said before, look, I know there's some improvements to bridges that need to occur as part of that work that you're talking about there, and certainly we all want to make sure those are safe for sure. But it does tie in exactly what I just said before. We have these siloed conversations, and we get into this, what are our road projects and what are we working on that line, right? Versus, hey, how about we invest in New Jersey Transit so more folks can use mass transit to get to work or get into the city and utilize those pieces, and they don't need to rely on vehicular, their cars to get in, which means we don't need the lane expansion to get us all the way down to the bottleneck of the same number of tunnels to get into the city, right? So I do think they're all connected. The short answer for me is I would love to see those dollars invested in things like New Jersey Transit, mass transit, to allow us to make the improvements that we need. Certainly addressing a couple of the safety pieces that have to happen as part of that project for sure. But investing in a way that we look at this more comprehensively, as I've said before, even in that previous answer. And then your last question.
That's it. Yeah. Basically, sustainable transportation. You nailed it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. I know the climate is a very, very critical one for us to have as we live in the densest state in the nation, with also the densest highway per capita in the nation. So thank you so much, Doug, for your questions and for your time. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Julie for her 15 minutes. It is in an area that is so critical given what's happening on the federal side. So Julie, floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Sean, as always, it's great to see you.
Great to see you too.
I think we'll just do a full disclosure here. Sean and I have known each other for years and years and years and years by now.
Yes, for years and years and years, that's right. That's right. Although, we're not calling each other the work wife and husband on this one.
No,
folks,
no, not
but
on
we've
this
known
one,
each
not
other
on this one,
for
but
a
we've done
long,
a
long
lot of
time.
work. Yeah, a lot of
We're
work on
good
school
friends.
funding and testing and all that kind of fun stuff, because there's always an intersection, obviously, between teachers and parents. So
Yeah.
that's always appreciated. So I guess let's just get right into this. So for the audience, some of this stuff is a little bit in the weeds, so please feel free to ask questions and we'll be sure to follow up if there is something that just that you're not aware of. But so I want to talk about desegregation, or really school integration. The lawsuit, there had been about 1.5 years worth of negotiations between the state and the plaintiff on that suit, trying to get the state to better integrate our schools. We have some of the most segregated schools in the country. I believe it's something like 7th for Latinos and 6th for Black students. This is not a good thing. It's not good for anybody. And since the negotiations appear to have failed and it's going back to court, what would you like to see happen as governor? And what steps would you take to try to move our schools towards better integrating our students and providing equity in the places where you can't do that?
Yeah. So first, let me say this, and I know I alluded to it in my opening when was asking me this, some of our first questions. It is tied together, right? We have to acknowledge that we've got very segregated communities, right? Which has also led us to very segregated schools. So I want to start by saying, when I talk about making sure we can meet our housing needs, and certainly having housing that's affordable to folks in every single one of our communities, that's going to help us in a big way. That's going to allow for diversification and allow certainly for less segregation that unfortunately we see here in this state. So I want to acknowledge that, and certainly use it as a moment to talk about, I've got that plan for rental units and certainly home ownership, et cetera. And certainly in other spaces, hopefully folks have heard me talk about it. But specifically to our schools, look, I think there are real opportunities here to take action. I speak from experience, in Montclair here, as I know are also aware, we've got a universal magnet system, right? Where, as a parent, I will note with a little bit of stress, you decide where is your child going to go and what's going to be the focus. And what that's led to is a system where we rank our top 3 choices. And explicitly before, our district would use race and other factors to determine where students would go. And now they use a number of other factors, given the recent Supreme Court rulings, to make sure students move into different schools. But what it has led to is a much more diverse school system, right, within our community. And that's an important thing that I think we start with. I say that because we do need to begin, right? There are plenty of communities, including some of our biggest cities. Let's just talk about one like Jersey City as an example. It is unbelievably segregated within the city, right? And we have an opportunity there to say, hey, we can work to desegregate our schools in this community, in this city, in that case, by doing a lot of what we do in Montclair, right? Let's talk about more universal busing within the system. Let's talk about having parents, pick those schools that they're looking at to say, hey, this is the focus we want. And let's again use a number of factors to get us much more diversity within our school system. I think that's super important. I think the next thing I would do is, and I know there was some discussions of this, so I'm not telling you anything new, but certainly to the group, but there's also then, and what I would do as governor is, let's utilize the school funding formula to incentivize, districts that then surround a community like Jersey City or others beyond and beyond and beyond, to say, hey, we know it's allowed legally, but let's encourage folks to take in kids from nearby communities, right, that are expanding that diversity that I just spoke about within a community, and broaden that ring and broaden that ring. Again, not leading to a moment where we've got to, bus kids unbelievable distances and all the times that they have to ride and all those things. But let's talk about nearby districts and incentivize ways through the formula that folks are going to, again, have more opportunity to see less segregation, and certainly more diversification that leads to better outcomes and better experiences for every single one of our kids and educators, right? So I think in that dynamic, that's how I would invest and go about it. And certainly I think we need to be aggressive in it. We shouldn't be just waiting for a court ruling to kind of implement these things and to wait to see what happens. We can take these steps right now. They're best practices, in my opinion, right now, and we can start to see desegregation right now through those actions.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, I obviously agree with you on that. I think there are things that the state could do, the districts can do, to start making those experiences a lot more equitable, for our kids. Just moving on to funding, because that's obviously going to be a really big issue, but let's talk about what's happening right now with this budget. There are budgetary language changes that make some pretty big changes to how our funding formula works for the next year. But because it's just in budget language and not in statute, it will revert back to statute after this next year. So those include, increasing cap date to, capping that off at 6%, and districts weren't losing more than 3%, which is a very big difference to what it's been in the last couple of years where districts were getting hit really hard. Changing the special education formula within SFRA so that at least districts are getting money for the number of kids they're serving, although my understanding is it is not tiered, so it's still treating every disability as though it's the same. But districts that have high numbers of students with disabilities, there at least saw some pretty good increases in the superintendents I've talked to. So what is your plan for SFRA? We have not had an EAR done that in my opinion and in the opinion of the Educational Law Center has not been as thorough as it should be. What would you want to see happen with our funding formula?
Yeah, I think some of the things you just described to everybody listening need to be incorporated into the formula, with the addition of understanding that students with special needs, there are different costs, and districts should be compensated and given dollars to address that and help that and support students based on those things in a different way through the formula, right? So I think with that addition, the pieces you talked about, the 6% increase and 3% reduction maximum is a good thing as well. And I think there's a few other places where it can be smooth, taking an average of next 5 years in terms of we've seen that, whether it's folks maybe with more wealth moving into a community or leaving and so forth. So bottom line is I've testified in front of the Senate and Assembly budget hearings a number of times, sat there with you and so many others, right? And spoken specifically on this issue, saying, hey, it was always supposed to be where we review the formula, where we make changes. We don't throw it all out. There are folks who want to just get rid of it. And this is something that's passed the test through the Supreme Court to say this is something that gets us what we need, but we do need to make changes, right? And we should be and should have been all along. I would fully support that. I think what we constantly have seen is, an urgency around it when it's budget time, and certainly when districts, are forced then to scramble. And the legislature has been coming in with these band-aids, right? Rushing in with additional dollars to say, oh, wait a minute, not really what we intended. So let's, put some money at this issue. And then once that happens, everybody goes back to business as usual. And oh, by the way, the next year somehow sneaks up on everybody, right? And do it over and over and over. And it makes no sense. And quite frankly, it's harmful, right? Because so many districts are scrambling every year with the, forward, back, yes, no. And, nobody budgets like that. Nobody could, kind of move forward in a consistent way like that. So as governor, I would absolutely make sure we've got a task force there to review the funding formula, to incorporate the pieces that we do see as positive changes in the budget here into the formula itself. Look at some other pieces I've just described in terms of some other things that can be smooth, and certainly also tiering and differentiating the dollars that the formula accounts for students with special needs. So I think those are some of the major ones that we do, but it's an urgency to do something about it rather than waiting until it's budget time and then we scramble to do something.
Right. Yeah, I agree. As you know, Save Our Schools has been testifying for, I don't know, 12 or 13 years on exactly this. And it does feel like it becomes all of a sudden super duper urgent and we have to figure out something really, really fast. And then everybody goes, we're good for another year. And it's just rinse repeat. It's just rinse repeat. Yeah. We're kind of tired of doing that. So I do want to talk a little bit about IDA and Medicaid. So with the continuing resolution having just been passed, IDA Title I funds are theoretically okay through the next, through the next several months anyway. Title II probably not so much, which is obviously a problem for teachers or for school districts and the state to be able to pay for teacher training and for professional development and things like that. Let's say worst case scenario and IDA funding either goes away or is cut significantly. And I'm sure so the audience knows, we're talking about $500,000 a year. No, 500 million, sorry, a year for IDA. And And then for Medicaid, because Medicaid covers the costs for some students with disabilities, physical therapy and things like that. And some more medically related things for the kids who are more significantly disabled. How are you going to find the money in the state to make that up? Number one. And number two, the Office of Civil Rights at the federal level is effectively shut down. What are you going to do in state to make sure that the civil rights of students with disabilities are upheld if all of this stuff goes away?
Yeah, so a couple things I'll say, and let me just be very clear on this too. Whether it's, there's been a lot of talk, right, about Title I, IDEA, right, about a 1.2 billion, right? You're talking
Right.
about Medicaid, right, the losses there and the impact certainly on our youngest and certainly even our seniors. There's just so many spots where I think Governor Murphy had put out the number, right, $22.5 billion in total that we see from the federal government, come into our state for varying programs for sure. But I would just say this because I think it applies to all of them. I think we know exactly what's happening here, though, right? I mean, Elon Musk is sitting in there, right? Controlling those strings and being that puppet master for one reason, right? They are looking to find these dollars so that they can give massive tax breaks to billionaires and to the very wealthiest corporations, right? That is what they're doing. We don't have to wonder about it. It's spelled out in Project 2025. We all know it's coming. And I'm under no illusions that they're going to say we're eliminating, the Department of Ed, or we're eliminating these other things, and here's all your money in New Jersey, right? That is not, what's going to be continuing to happen. We know that that's coming, and I have to say, listen, and I know Governor Murphy's worked hard to provide a budget that has, some structural stability and made improvements over the years, and kudos from where our previous governor Christie had left it. Immense strides, wonderful, but we are in a situation now where we cannot, right? To his point, I think he said in his budget address, we cannot, we can't break the glass, even as he said, and try to fix this. We cannot make up those dollars unless we distinguish ourselves as Democrats, I'll just say. But certainly one of the things I would do aggressively is say, follow the money. We in New Jersey need to go after every single dollar, right? Where they give these massive tax breaks to folks, where they're giving it to billionaires and they're giving it to these ultra wealthy corporations. We need to go after every single one of those dollars and say we are going to, through changing our tax policies in our state, we're going to aggressively get every single one of those dollars and reinvest it in the very programs that they're undermining to steal those dollars out of our pockets to begin with. That is the only way we will have enough revenues to be able to support the programs that they keep undermining, right? So I think it's an understanding of that and an understanding that we need to be aggressive in that. We need to be aggressive because we can't have a long gap in between when they pull all our funding away and we then bring in the dollars to then support the very things that we don't want to see happen, be eliminated. So we've got to be aggressive in our time frame and our timelines there. But it's going to be a clear understanding that there is no nibbling around the edges and figuring out how we use our state dollars to mend all of these holes in a budget if they truly come after all these things. And I think they will. I believe them when they tell me this. I believe when I read it. I think they will. So that's how we get the dollars there. That's how we make sure we're investing. But I'll just say this also to the other part of your question. I think it's more important than ever that we have every entity at the state level working in full effect and with full efficiency. I will say this, and love Governor Murphy, and certainly, maybe would give him a little better than the C I gave him in the debate, C+ that I gave him, maybe give him a B,
Right.
B-, right? But
Right.
I will say this. I think we would all probably express some frustration that there have been so many committees, commissions, boards that have been left understaffed, right? There have been so many, departments that have been left without the folks needed to get the job done. It's been one of the spots that has been immensely frustrating for folks who wanted to see that big change from our previous administration here in state, and yet we didn't see it, right? And I think as governor, it is imperative. And what I would do is really sit down to make sure we are filling those positions in partnership with colleagues like you to make sure we're having conversation with folks who are impacted by the different areas we're talking. But every one of these need to be filled, ready to go, and working efficiently for residents in this state, because we can't rely on the federal government to protect us environmentally. We've got to be running on all cylinders here. We can't rely on the Department of Education federally. We've got to be running here. We can't rely on, on and on and on. We've got to make sure we're investing in there. And what I will do is invest my time to make sure and capital to make sure those positions are filled and we're fighting and rowing in the same direction for what New Jersey needs.
Okay. So Wynn, I'm going to ignore you for a minute because I got one question. I do want to get to this because I think this has not been an issue in New Jersey so much, but school privatization has been a very big issue in many other states. So my colleagues in Arizona and Florida and Wisconsin and Iowa and Ohio in particular have been so hard hit, not only by mass expansion of charter schools and cyber charter schools, but also school vouchers. And we have managed to keep school vouchers out of the state of New Jersey through the help, Save Our Schools New Jersey, along with NJEA and the Education Law Center and many other organizations and national organizations pitching in to help us fight against having private school vouchers here in the state of New Jersey. But now there's going to be a federal law, which I have no doubt is going to pass. And that will mean that there will be a federal tax break to anybody making a donation. And it sounds like it'll be at 100%, which is really something. But it also means that vouchers theoretically could be used here in the state of New Jersey. And I worry about this because I'm afraid it's going to open the door and somebody will take another shot at trying to also have a state level version of this and use state funding to do this. So talk to me a little bit about school vouchers, Sean.
Yeah, so not supportive at all. Maybe the least surprising thing I've said here, right? But not supportive at all. And I certainly also understand the impact that that has on our traditional public schools, right? Which so many students rely on. So it's not just about, we're all talking numbers here, and understandably so, but it's about the impact on kids. And it's just not what we should be doing. And I also thank you for asking, because I think it's a differentiator between myself and some of the others running, right? We've seen what they maybe have done in their cities. We see what they've stood for and who supported their campaigns. Look, that's not something that I support, and it's certainly something that I would be pushing back on as governor, and certainly making sure none of our state resources were going to do that work, and certainly also trying to be aggressive in kind of the way I answered the other question about follow the money, that we're getting the dollars we need to support all the entities that matter, including our traditional public schools here in New Jersey.
Perfect.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Sean.
much. I have to leave it there. We are over time. I want to thank the attendees. I especially want to thank our illustrious crew of state advocates. As you guys have heard, they have deep knowledge and experience in each of their policy areas. I hope that you had a chance to really listen and hear a lot of the wonk. I know the wonk is not the sexy, fun thing, but that's really what gets the work done, right? And so thank you so much to Julie, to Doug, and to Antoinette for your evening. I really appreciate it. Sean, I want to thank you so much to take time away from your family to join us here, to face the tough questions. We really appreciate it. We do have questions in the chat that was not answered. May I send that to your campaign and get responses back?
Yes, please. Thank you. Love that.
Wonderful. We would love to have your responses, and as we get them back, we will post it in the description under YouTube so everyone can see it. So again, thank you so much to everyone for joining us. And again, Sean, thank you for running, and thank you for being here.
No, thank you so much. Appreciate the advocacy work that all of you and everybody on here does. And this is that exciting opportunity where we truly can say, hey, this is our chance to press and prod folks to get them to where they need to be. We know it's a competitive race here, and that's a good thing for everybody. And certainly I hope to come out on top, needless to say. But we're all going to work hard to make that happen. And certainly these forums and things like that are part of that process. So thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate the time.
Everyone, hope to see you for the next event. Good night.
Have a good night, folks.